Stu, can you give me a rundown on somebody ran some numbers and said for this thing to come into line with Al Franken needed to come up with a certain number of votes, and it could only be this distance apart. Can you explain this real quick?
Yeah, basically, there's 34,916 unrecorded votes for the Senate race in Minnesota. And basically, it's one of these stat geek sites that we've talked about, 538.com. It's a guy who's, a big statistician. And he's gone through, and they went through, and they looked at, Florida and all the recounts. There's so much detail on that race. You could tell how many people voted for just presidents skipped a race, or how many people typically voted in two things, or one, or whatever. And they've actually lowered this now to how many votes they think all of these votes will go, and it's going to favor Franken because they're mostly Democratic circles. They now believe it will go about 206 votes to Al Franken.
Okay, so now how many on the night of the election? It was 725 votes between Norm Coleman and Al Franken. Wednesday, it had shrunk by to 477. Thursday, it was down to 236. Friday, 239. Late Sunday night, the difference had gone to 221. By the way, the new number is exactly 206. We go to, is he on the phone? Do we have John Lott on the phone yet? Nope, apparently lost him. Okay. John Lott is a guy who is a number cruncher, and he's a guy who's been looking at this. You will not believe what is happening now in Minnesota. In Minnesota now, they are finding votes in people's cars. How are they finding votes in people's cars? Why should we count the ones that were sitting in a car? Correcting typos, they found 435 votes to Al Franken, and they took 69 votes from Coleman. They're not finding any in favor of Coleman, just the other way around. And it just becomes more and more odd. John Lott, welcome to the program. John, they have found an awful lot of votes for Al Franken.
Yeah, I know. It's been pretty amazing. I mean, just from a statistical point of view, what's the probability that this would happen? I mean, if you compare the U.S. Senate race there to either the presidential race in Minnesota or all the congressional races or all the state representative races in the entire state there, you have more total changes that have occurred in the U.S. Senate race than the sum of all the other races there that have been there in the state.
So more people made a mistake, they'd have us believe.
Right. Well, in terms of just correcting these typos, that's right.
Right. So the mistake was always for Al Franken or against him. When they corrected it, that went for more than all of the other errors in every other category in the entire state in every race.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in particular, I mean, there were three precincts in particular that accounted for almost all of the errors in favor of Franken. I mean, you had a number of precincts, about 40 or so, that had some errors in it, but there were three in particular. One that was just a little bit north of Duluth that accounted for almost half of the errors in favor of Franken, but there were two other precincts that accounted for about 100 each.
Yeah, but we're looking at, those are three precincts. There can't be a lot of precincts. How many precincts are there? If almost all of them are coming from these three precincts, what are there, 6 precincts?
Well, there's 4,130 precincts in the state.
Wow, that's odd, huh? You'd think if there was some sort of a problem, it would have been kind of widespread.
Right, well, just the one precinct that gave almost Franken half the votes that he picked up, you had more errors in that one precinct than in the entire state for the presidential race, or the entire state for all the congressional races, or the entire state for all the state representative races.
Well, but I saw that the Minneapolis Star-Tribune said that the mistakes in that one particular precinct was because the county officials were exhausted. So there must have been mistakes in all of the races, not just the Senate race there in that one precinct.
Right. Well, I can tell a little bit of facetiousness in your question, the way you're asking it. It was the only race that they had a mistake. None of the other races in that precinct did they have a mistake in how it was entered in.
Were they only sleepy? while punching in votes for Al Franken and wide awake every other race?
I don't know. I mean, you'd have to. I mean, it seems a little hard to believe. I'm just saying that if you look at this across the state, it's just surprising that you see these errors being so large in these few precincts that are just overwhelmed. Even all some of the errors across the entire rest of the state, and why it would only occur in the one race where it was close, and not the same type of errors just in any of the other races where it wasn't close is what's the real hard thing to figure out.
By the way, John Lott is the author of Freedomomics and a senior research scientist at the University of Maryland. Tell me a little bit about the ACORN influence here.
Well, ACORN, obviously, across the country has been involved in registering a lot of individuals. The question is how many times they've registered a number of those people. And in Minnesota, there were 43,000 registrations that were entered in. That's about 75% of all the new voters in Minnesota over the last 2 years. And they've had a big impact here, particularly when you're talking about a race where right now you're talking about a couple hundred votes that may be separating the two candidates, even a small amount of fraud there. And Minnesota doesn't have this, even has kind of the most minimal rules in terms of ID requirements. One can go and the first time that you vote, you can go and show a utility bill, for example, which are very easy to forge. All you have to do is have paper that looks like, from the utility company, and have a computer and a printer, and it's easy enough to make up an ID then.
John, I've only got about 10 seconds here. The odds that Al Franken does not win in a recount?
Well, there are two issues that are occurring. If you're merely looking at divining the intentions, he shouldn't really pick up any there because of the safeguards that are already in the system.
Okay.
The big issue is going to be here in terms of them finding votes that weren't counted originally, and they seem to already be finding new votes.
I always leave my votes in the car like the others do. John, thanks very much.
Before we go, the guy that is counting the votes in Minnesota, a member of ACORN.
Hey, how about that? Makes us all feel better.